Hey everyone, Nick here from Talking Cardboard, and this is the third installment in the Late Night Talking Cardboard podcast. So once again, I'm Nick, and I'm joined with John and Cory from Talking Cardboard, and
Hello.
Hey everyone.
we're here to talk about cardboard, or more specifically, board games. So thank you so much for joining us if you're listening to this podcast via audio, but also please note that we also are doing, we record the video of these podcasts so you can see our beautiful faces on our YouTube channel. Just head to the Talking Cardboard YouTube page and you'll see Talking Cardboard podcast number 3, and you can watch the video and also see some visuals of the games that we're talking about throughout this podcast. So without further ado, let's get into our first segment here, and this is something we actually probably should have done in the first podcast episode, if not our second, but that's talk about the mission statement of Talking Cardboard. And as you can imagine, we're a group of guys that just want to talk about board games, but what is it that we're trying to accomplish by doing that? And specifically, we did discuss this as a group a few months ago to come up with a mission statement, and we've determined that our main objective is that we're a group of folks who are passionate about board games and want to share this passion with and our thoughts with others, to try to bring more board gamers into the hobby, because I think we all agree that throughout our day-to-day lives there's a lot of people that we come across that had no idea that there's so many different types of board games that exist. Cory, kind of what would you like to maybe add to that brief mission statement there about the purpose of Talking Cardboard?
Yeah, I would say that, we try to bring different things to the table, but we also don't shy away from things that have already been done before within the hobby, just to kind of hit the hammer, on the head, and just try to drive home just a common mission statement that a lot of other channels do as well, just trying to introduce gaming to new players, new people, also trying to adapt into now, with a segment that I just came out with recently, trying to introduce games to like younger families or younger kids as well, and trying to introduce that into their lives, because I think that gaming provides something good for all different age groups, all types of people, all walks of life. And I think people don't necessarily know to what extent different types of games that are currently out there on the market, and how much fun and how much learning and strategy and other things that they can provide. So I think that if we can just try to reach as many people as possible and just try to help the community out, the best we can to reach more people, I think that everybody can benefit from that.
Anything you wanted to add to that, John?
Yeah, I think Cory and Nick hit on a lot of it, but I guess one of our bigger values that we really want to put out there is like community. We definitely want to gain enough traction here to grow our community and hopefully be able to do some cool live stuff, at least in the Minnesota area where we're from, with fundraiser conventions and stuff like that. So that's also kind of part of our mission, at least for terms of ourselves, of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, just what John said. I think that's important, what John just said. We have been doing this now for, I think, a little over 4 years, almost 5 years now, but more recently, just over the last year or so, we've been really trying. Well, we've done the 24-hour marathon, live on our channel for a while, that helps, fundraise for children's hospitals and things like that. But more over the past year, we're now trying to get into the more of the convention space and have live panels and provide some just something to give back to the community and something to grow the community, like John said, both locally here in Minnesota, and then hopefully expanding out to other states as well. Maybe doing some collaboration work with other publishers or designers, or just anything we can do to help provide something fun and entertaining to the community. yeah, so
Great. So hopefully that gives you kind of a better sense of what we're trying to do here at Talking Cardboard. It's not just making content for the sake of making content. We do actually we have a genuine interest in trying to really elevate this hobby and normalize it and make it so that everyone that you meet on the street is aware of the hobby board game industry. So with that said, let's move on to what games we've been playing. And first, we'll talk about games we've played as a group. And just recently, over at my house here on the table right behind me, we played Ark Nova, which was the very first time I've actually ever played this game. And many of you are probably wondering how it took me so long to actually play what's considered one of the top games out there. And I'm glad I finally did get this chance because I personally enjoyed my time playing it. With that said, I think Cory, you had it on your top. It was on your top list, right?
yep.
Yep. So, spoiler alert! If you haven't watched any of our top, was it 1 through 5 or 5 through 10 video?
I don't remember what number it is,
Okay.
or what number it was.
Top 10.
It's currently still number 11 on the BGG Hotness, and it's been out for 2.5 years. So it's hot, I think, on most people's lists.
So if you're not familiar with what Ark Nova is about, you're basically managing your own zoo. Very reminiscent of the Zoo Tycoon computer game, which is why I was attracted to this game and was excited to finally play it. And essentially, it's a point. It's a point game. Although I guess in the game it's tickets and conservation points. You're trying to basically get both, right?
Yeah, the tickets are are appeal points, and then you have conservation effort points too. And yeah, two opposite tracks going in opposite directions. And as soon as they cross, that triggers the last round of the game. And if the person who crosses theirs the furthest wins. So there are some negative points in the game, and if you are able to cross your two paths, then you get positive points. So whoever has the most positive points wins. So a cool mechanism too that only a couple other games have done for end games, end game triggering and the whole scoring thing with the two tracks having to cross. So that's unique all in itself too.
Yeah, and the thing that I enjoyed about this game was all the different options that you have at your disposal. First of all, the starting player boards, or I guess maps, essentially, that you have are all different. So no one player has the same starting position, and in addition, there's just so many variety of ways to get conservation points, get tickets. There's all different types of animals. There's so many different cards. There's all these different tracks, and with these heavier Euro games, my concern is always if it's too symmetrical and everyone's starting the same way, that there's going to be one kind of clear path to victory every time you play the game, where I felt with Ark Nova that was definitely not the case, because your starting board, your starting secret conservation point objectives are going to kind of dictate the style of play you might have, what types of animals you might want to try to get into your zoo, that sort of thing, which then to me makes it exciting to try to play again, to try and play a completely different game. John, what are your kind of reactions and thoughts about Ark Nova?
I definitely like managing my zoo. You have to build enclosures for the animals you then play on a later turn. I think that's a really cool tile placement and area management type aspect to the game. You've also have to manage the kind of group conservation efforts that are going on, which I think tends to keep it interesting when players are vying for that top conservation spot on the card. So definitely got to judge when to take your actions optimally to beat other people to the punch.
One thing I will add also is that it's typically a 3-hour game every time, and I feel like it ramps up toward the end pretty quickly. At least, like even this last time we played, I felt like the first 2.5 hours of the game, it was kind of building towards your overall strategies, building up your zoo, and then within the last half an hour, at least for me, I felt like I wasn't acting on enough of the conservation efforts. I was building up for too long, and then I kind of fell behind there. So there's definitely one. It's definitely got that feeling where it ramps up to the point where you better turn or kind of switch into endgame scoring mode before it's too late to try to get those points at the very end of the game. So I feel like you kind of get caught in the kind of wrapped up in the game itself for 2.5 hours, and you're just kind of having fun doing your own thing. But it also kind of makes it neat how at the end it does ramp up to the point where you have to make that decision on when you're going to finally start scoring your overall strategies. So
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
got a cool effect.
Yep. I agree. It just seemed like it did ramp up quickly at the end. But overall, still, I think a game that we all enjoyed, and I think would definitely be willing to play again in the future. So, with that said, let's talk about another game we played as a group recently, and that's Gears of War, the board game. Now, I have had this game in my collection for quite some time. I've never fully gotten it. I've only gotten it to the table maybe a couple times over the many years that I've had it, and I finally was able to convince John, Cory, and then I think Cory's brothers Blake to play it with me. And it's of course based on the IP, is inspired by the Gears of War IP, tactical miniatures game, and it's I think it's just a lot of Ameritrash fun. There's a lot of unique aspects of this game that I haven't seen re-implemented since Gears of War came out. And another game designed by Cory Cheska, who does a lot of the great games from Fantasy Flight. But we did just the first scenario of the game, and I think the first scenario is probably, of course, since it's first, it's a little more vanilla than maybe the other scenarios that are missions that come with the game in the core box. It's sad to me that this game only had the core box and then a mini expansion before, and for whatever reason they decided to kill this game, and it's been out of print for many years now, because I do think there was a lot of potential to add so much content to this game in terms of weapons, characters, types of missions. And again, I'm not familiar with the IP. I feel like if I knew more about Gears of War, I probably would have appreciated this game even more. Cory, what were your kind of thoughts of Gears of War?
Yeah, I definitely felt like the first scenario was real vanilla. I would like to play it with, I think, some of the later scenarios to give it more of the full effect for the game. For me, I felt like, I don't know, I'm kind of a bad example of kind of speaking on a game like this, because I usually gear more towards Euro games and not really the Ameritrash style of game, so it's not really necessarily my style. But maybe some of the later scenarios has some more strategic options instead of just kind of walking down a hallway and throwing some dice at people. So I would like to try, I think, some of the more further scenarios. So.
And John, how about you?
Well, I am a big Gears of War fan. The reason why I originally got an Xbox 360 is to play that with friends, and played 1, 2, 3. The game definitely captures the feel of Gears of War. Even the first vanilla mission was pretty tough. I mean, we didn't even end up winning it, but that may have been due to poor decisions for someone to run towards the end of the map and trigger all these guys that spawned.
Who did that? Yeah.
I don't know. It has some really interesting mechanics with like managing your ammo for your weapons, interacting with crates and getting new weapons. I thought that was really cool. And there's cover spots, pretty big part of the video game is the ability to take cover and vault over it to the next set of cover. And I think the game did a really good job incorporating that. So I thought it was fun. I like games like that where, like you said, Ameritrash type games. So I had a lot of fun with it and would like to see, more of the scenarios and how they differ.
Great. Thanks, John. So then, next game on the list that we played as a group recently was Beyond the Sun, and this is a game that I believe Cory owns.
Yep.
But John also was very excited about getting this to the table.
100%.
With the first expansion too.
With the first expansion. I really didn't have much background of this game until we played it the night we played it. So Cory, I guess I'll let you kind of give an overview of how the game works and what your thoughts
Yeah,
were.
I mean, Beyond the Sun is pretty much Tech Tree, the board game. It's all about just a big tech tree on the main board. You are it's simple worker placement. There's some spots that you're going to get these different technologies and to kind of gear up and send out spaceships on the main world maps to try to vie for area control on these different planets, and that in turn will give you some special abilities and or victory points and that sort of thing. So it's got a couple different things going on, but it's kind of got that old school worker placement style to it, kind of like you would see in games like Bus, or some other just very simplistic, where you can go to a spot if it's vacant, but then you're blocking that spot. But then it's also kind of got homage to that older worker placement style, where there are certain worker placement actions that have multiple locations on each spot for people to go to. So it's not just if you go there, you're blocking the entire spot. If it's got more than one location to place a worker there, it's available for others. But you do kind of have to race to certain spots that you really do need, because they fill up quickly, and then if they're full, you can't go there. But it's really neat taking those different tech tree paths. I think everybody feels different in what they're doing. You can tech up to the same technologies that other players are doing and have the same. Essentially, these technologies. I should back up a second. The different technologies give you new worker placement spots to go to, as well, which is really neat. And if you teched up in that spot, you can go there and use that worker placement action. But if you have not teched up, you can't use that action. It's not available to you at all. So that's really cool. Another cool kind of race-like feature to this game is that if you're the first player to tech up in a certain technology, you're the one actually deciding which technology worker placement spots or spot goes there, because you can choose from a couple different cards to actually build in that location. So you're really kind of picking and choosing what will work better for your strategy if you're the first one to go to that spot. And there's technologies 1, 2, 3, and 4. As you tech up further along the tree, they obviously get better and better. Eventually, the fourth technology is just end game victory points. And each technology has different colors to it as well, and that'll kind of tell you what style of worker placement spot it's going to be. Like red, for example, is more combat or more strategy heavy on area control, and then you've got like yellow and blue and all these different worker placement spots that vary a lot. So it's a really neat game. We play with the leaders of whatever expansion, and it added a little bit more asymmetry to the game and a little bit more variability to like the cards that come out. So definitely a nice expansion. I wouldn't say it's like an essential expansion, but definitely a good one to add if you enjoy the base game. And I'll let you guys kind of speak on it, and then I'll kind of tell you all about my solo experience with it in a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, John, with your
Yeah,
thoughts.
I really like this game, and the uniqueness of Tech Tree being the focus point of this game, I thought was going to make it boring, but man, they really did it well. And I think the strategy and nuance that those technologies provide really says a lot about what you can do and strategies you can pursue. Um, and obviously, everything you're doing on the tech tree ties over to the area control side of things, which actually isn't the focus of the game, but it does. I'm trying to think of the word here. Does tie nicely together with each other, uh, and providing you more tactical options for how you are managing your own player board and getting some of these automation tokens off your board and onto these planets that you are essentially taking over temporarily or preferably permanently if you can keep opponents out of there. But I'm a really big fan of this. Actually, play it again now, just talking about it. So
Yeah, for me, I definitely appreciated a lot of the mechanics that were unique from to me that I had not really seen in games before. I liked how if there was an action slot that was already being used by one of your opponents, there to do a certain action, there generally was another action spot still available. Maybe it's just not wasn't as optimal as the action spot you wanted to take, but you could at least still take it to like move ships. Like maybe you could move your ships 5 if you got the one slot that you really wanted, but an opponent was blocking it, so now you can only move 3. So I liked how there was enough opportunity to still do the things you wanted to do, even but sometimes it just wasn't quite as optimal as you would have liked it because of your opponents blocking you out, but you were never like forced to do something completely opposite of what you wanted to do on your turn. So I like that aspect of this game. I would say that the asymmetry in this game wasn't as much as I felt in Ark Nova, just not comparing the two, just because I find them kind of bigger hero style games, and we played both of them recently. With Ark Nova, I felt there was more of a connection for me to the theme compared to Beyond the Sun. I won't say it was. There was a little bit of a connection to the theme. I did enjoy the fact that there was this tactical element of you moving your ships around the galaxy and trying to take over planets, but some of the things were a little more esoteric to me than again compared to Ark Nova. So for me, I wasn't maybe, of course, as strongly positive on the game as Cory and John were, but I would try it again for the sake of seeing it, playing again and trying maybe a different faction, because that was one thing I did appreciate too about, just like with Ark Nova, with Beyond the Sun, you have a starting player board that is slightly different than your opponents, so you do feel that your focus might be a little different than what your opponents are trying to do. So
yeah, and with most Euro games, I mean, the theme isn't like front and center, and that's definitely not really Beyond the Sun, I guess. But um, like in any good Euro game, it does provide that tension and kind of that feeling that you want to get to a spot before other people do, and it just kind of creates some of those tense moments, which was cool to see. And I was gonna say that I have soloed the game as well, and I was very surprised with the solo version of the game, or the solo play. It just introduced one deck of cards, which was your opponent, and when you flipped over a card, that was the action that they would do, and it was just very simply laid out, played very smooth. I was super surprised, and it still provided a lot of tension in the gameplay, and it made the game on a very quick timer. So the game solo only played in about 45 minutes, and you had to try to get the best score you could before the bad team would end the game. What was really cool also is that underneath each of the technology cards, there was an anarchist card, and if they were the ones who teched up and triggered that anarchy card, a bad event would happen to you. But if you were the one to tech up and trigger that spot, then a good event would happen. So it provided that same kind of tension and stress that a multiplayer game of this would be, where you're trying to race and get to those spots before your opponents, so you'd get that good bonus. But then inevitably there are spots that obviously you can't get everything, so the AI opponent was triggering these bad events that would really hinder you and slow you down. Essentially, you're just looking for a positive score in this game. If you get above 0, it's essentially you did well. If you get 15 or higher, that's the best you can do in the game. So it's really low scoring, very tense, very tight on points. Another version of a game where you can get negative points. And yeah, I was very, very surprised that it felt so tense, but yet so smooth and easy to play, and you could solo it in only about 40 to 45 minutes. Yeah, I give big props to the solo version in this game.
Great, awesome. Well, that's good to hear, Cory. So with that said, we'll move on to the last group game that we've played, and this was actually specifically just John and Cory that were playing this, and that was Blood Rage. So with that, Cory, go ahead and give your elevator pitch on Blood Rage.
I'll let John do it because I'm losing my voice here, but
okay,
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Blood Rage is a fan favorite of Talking Cardboard, at least it was in the early days here. Finally got it to the table again for the first time in a long time, probably a couple years. At its core, it's an area control game where you're sending your Vikings and chieftains down onto Midgard to take control of various locations, obviously, area control. Each of the boards, you do kind of a card drafting mechanic to start the round, and then you're playing a card or taking an action on your turn using your rage, and you have other abilities on your board, like number of units you can have out there, and of glory you get for winning battles, and it all just kind of takes place, and you're trying to essentially upgrade your clan units and monsters, at the end of the day have the most points, either through combat or, sending units to Valhalla. So definitely several strategies there that you can take advantage of, and simple game, fun to play. Taught it to a new player and they ended up winning. So clearly you do not have to be an expert to do well.
No, this game is just pure joy, pure fun. One that we've been bringing back to the table. Not enough, but usually once or twice a year at least. And yeah, we haven't played it for a couple of years now. It came back to us really quickly. We all learned, relearned how to play within the first couple minutes. It was like, oh yeah, that's how that works. And very familiar, easy to pick up and play, easy to teach. Like we said, we taught a new player, and he ended up winning the game. And I think one that anybody can really jump into. And another cool thing with this is you feel like you're involved and that you are competitive the whole game, no matter how you're doing, because you can get points for dying in this game. You can get points for doing well. You can get points for doing poorly, and it all comes down to the cards you're choosing to draft for your hand at the beginning of each of the rounds. And I really think Eric Lang, the designer of this game, did a very good job designing it so everybody felt in the race, so to speak, the whole time.
Yeah, this is still probably my favorite out of the trilogy of Blood Rage, Ankh, Kemet. Mainly probably for, what's that?
No, not Kemet. Ankh, Blood Rage, and the other one.
Rising Honor.
Rising
right?
Sun.
Rising Sun. Yeah, my bad. Kemet's very similar, but not Eric Lang. I just like the Viking theme and the ease of play on this one. I think Rising Sun and Ankh add more, which may suit some players. But for what we're going for here, this takes the top spot.
And a little teaser for you all. I saw an Eric Lang interview recently on the interwebs, and there's talks that he's coming out with a 2.0 version of Blood Rage, which is going to not really streamline the game or anything, but just kind of nerf some of the cards that are maybe too powerful, or introduce some more cards to give some more variety, and kind of update it, because this game came out in 2015, which doesn't seem like too long ago, but that's going on, it's over 8 years, almost 9 years now, so it's almost at that 10-year mark, and I think it's due for another not really re-implementation, but maybe kind of an update to or kind of a revisit. So I'm excited to see what happens with that when that comes out.
Great. Well, for the sake of time, we'll talk quickly about the games that we played individually here, and then move on to the BGG top hotness list update. So for me, a game that I recently have been playing actually on Tabletop Simulator, because my friends I've been playing with do not live near me, but that's Tide of Iron, the board game. And this is a World War II tactical game that came out actually, I guess, in 2007 from Fantasy Flight Game. Another Cory Kaneska game. And for me, it's one of my favorite games just because I really appreciated the kind of middleweight that this game takes. It's more complicated than Memoir 44, but not as complicated as many other World War II games, and there's this huge toy factor since all the pieces you're playing with are miniatures and you're building out your squads, and I just appreciate the gameplay in this in Tide of Iron, and there's so many expansions to it as well, and I think big part of the reason why I like this game is Tide of Iron is the different scenarios they have are all very different from one another in terms of the objectives and how you are trying to go about winning each scenario. So that was Tide of Iron. And then another game that I was recently playing with some co-workers was called the Bottle Imp, and this is a small little trick-taking board game, or card game I should say, really. What's unique about this trick-taking game is you are incentivized to win tricks. However, in the middle there's this bottle token that you can acquire during the game. If you play a card super low, you can pretty much guarantee you win a trick, but by doing so, you gain this bottle token, And if you end the round with the bottle token in front of you, then you actually end up getting negative points for that round. So it's kind of a somewhat of a, I guess you could say, a push your luck mechanic, because you're hoping that you get this bottle, but by the end you can, schlep it off to someone else before the end of the round. But anyway, that was called the Bottle Imp, and a fun. It's best with 3 players. So that was Bottle Imp. I know, Cory, we're going to talk about playing Beyond the Sun solo, which you had mentioned, and so then that brings me to John, where you were going to mention playing Undaunted recently. I assume the Normandy version.
Yeah, we're playing Undaunted Normandy. Me and a buddy got it to a table with a buddy who's not huge into gaming, but this is a nice game to pick up. World War II theme, a little bit of deck building, a little bit of tactical control, and strategy. Really, really fun. Really, really simple. Great game. Highly recommend.
Great, thanks, John. So with that, we'll get into our next segment, which is BGG Top 10 Hotness List Update. So it's been a few weeks now since the last time we did this, so there's been a lot of changes to this list. Starting with number 10, we now have a game called Barcelona. Barcelona actually was number 1 the last time we did this list, and that bumped off Ark Nova. Ark Nova is now no longer in the top 10 BGG Hotness list. At number 9, we have Heat Pedal to the Metal, which was also number 9 the last time we reviewed the BGG Hotness list. At number 8, we have Dune Imperium Uprising, which replaced Dune Imperium, ironically, from the last time we did this list. And then at number 7, we have Call of Duty, which knocked out the game Expeditions from the top 10. At number 6, we actually have the core game of Dune Imperium, which we'll touch on shortly here about Dune Imperium and that new expansion. That bumped off Mr. President, which Mr. President was, I think, on the BGG Hotness for a while. So Mr. President no longer on the top 10 BGG Hotness list. At number 5, we have a game called Space Alone, which bumped out The Witcher Old World. At number 4, we have World Wonders, which bumped out the game The White Castle. At number 3, we have Last Light, which bumped out Gloomholden. And at number 2, we have Voidfall, which bumped out Everdell Far Shore. And then finally, at number 1, we have the game Nucleum, which bumped out the game Gloomhaven, Buttons, and Bugs. So, with that said, Cory, I'll start with you. You mentioned that you had some things to share about Nucleum, which is a game I've actually never heard about until reviewing the BGG Top Hotness list.
Yeah, so Nucleum, I've been hearing rumblings of this game now for a little while, even before it hit top 10 Hotness, and now all of a sudden, here it is. People are now talking about it, and it is essentially a successor to many other popular games that have already come out, pulling mechanisms that people really enjoy from a lot of really heavy Euros, really popular Euros, to name a few, pulling mechanisms from Brass, which are, that's my favorite game of all time. So I'm very excited about that. But also pulling mechanisms from games like Concordia, and other really big Euro games that have been around for a while. But pretty much getting into the core gameplay, I'm really excited about Nucleum, where you are building out a network of different buildings, like in Brass. You have these different locations that require different buildings to be built there, but essentially you're trying to use nuclear power to power up your different buildings to get victory points from these buildings. The cool thing about it, that's pulling some of the mechanisms from Concordia, but this does it instead of cards in your hand, you have tiles that you're playing with, where you have essentially a hand of tiles that are in front of you, and those tiles will give you different actions. The 2 tiles that you draw in front of you are the 2 actions you can do on your turn, and basically you cannot use those actions on those tiles until you use the final tile to recall all those tiles back, basically flipping them all back to their active side again. So it's kind of deciding on when you're going to refresh your tiles, when you're not going to. Another cool thing is when you're building your routes, you are actually building like railroad tracks to transport these resources and build buildings like in Brass also. But in order to build a railroad track, you have to use the backside of one of your action tiles to build that track. So then you lose that action forever. So it's kind of deciding on which action you're going to forego for the rest of the game, which action you're okay with losing. But then there's a buy row of other action tiles that you can spend resources to buy new action tiles that are unique for you to then use for the future as well. And then maybe eventually turn those into track also. So some really neat things going on that pull from multiple Euro games and just throwing it all into one package, and just it's getting me really real excited to try it. So
Great. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I would definitely try it. John, I'll let you talk a little bit about this new Dune Imperium Uprising expansion. And I was trying to pull it up on BGG. There's no real images yet for the game, but with that said, go ahead and let me know your thoughts about this expansion that's coming out for Dune Imperium.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll say is there are a lot of sci-fi games on this hotness list right now. And Voidfall, Last Light look really cool. Don't know a lot about them, but just speaks wonders to that genre that it must be very popular right now. But Dune Imperium, top board game for talking cardboard right now. So really glad to see that it's getting a expansion / standalone update with Dune Imperium Uprising. It looks like what this does is taking the original game, adding some new actions and abilities, and also exploring a 6-player variant where you're playing in a 3v3 kind of battle over the planet of Arrakis. So that's very different from the 1v1v1v1 of the original game. Yeah, I don't even know how I feel about that. I mean, it's Dune Imperium, so I'm excited, but I have no clue what to expect and how that gets balanced. But as long as the deck building, the Euro placement, and how the factions play together kind of hold that core gameplay mechanics of the original base game, I'm sure it'll be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it piqued my interest when you mentioned that the new expansion would provide a 3v3 game. Is that what you said, John?
Yep, that is exactly it.
Yeah, yeah, and I, being more of a fan of cooperative, the next closest thing to a cooperative game is a team game, so that definitely makes me interested in maybe trying an expansion for sure at some point. It just requires then, I guess, 6 players to play, but I doubt that would be difficult to scrounge 6 players that want to play Dune Imperium.
Not for Dune Imperium, yeah. It should be easy.
So, all right, well, real quick here, the game that I just wanted a quick touch on was the Call of Duty board game, which is now at the number 7 spot on the list for the BGG Hotness. I would like to think anyone listening to this podcast or watching the video on our YouTube channel is familiar with the IP Call of Duty. Started as a World War II game on PC. I'm one of the few that probably played the original PC game of Call of Duty and on their computer at home, but nonetheless, now they're finally doing a board game implementation, and it's published by Arcane Wonders, which was, from my understanding, was made famous by their Mage Wars games, which I haven't yet to play, like most of my games. But now Arcane Wonders is the company that got the rights from Activision apparently to do a Call of Duty board game. It's on Kickstarter right now, as you can see on the screen if you're watching the YouTube video. Interestingly, only 150,000 raised so far with 1,000 backers. With an IP of Call of Duty, I figured it would be more by now. So, I was excited when this was announced because I'm all about trying to bring in new gamers. That's what we said our mission was at the start of this episode, that we want to bring in new gamers. So, what better way than to have a board game with an IP that millions and millions of people around the world are familiar with. So the fact there's only 1,000 backers for the board game is a little disappointing in my mind. Nonetheless, cool to see that they're making a board game about it. The one thing that immediately stood out to me that I thought was a unique idea is that they're using what looks to be kind of a waypoint or point-to-point system for combat and movement, very similar to what Cory and I were just talking about the other day which was used in the game Tannhauser, then re-implemented in the Unmatched games, that makes combat and line of sight very quick to determine, which is nice, but at the same time, Call of Duty, of course, or any FPS game, I think is all about tactical moving. So the fact that you are limited to just point to points kind of eliminates that aspect of the actual shooter, the PC game or video console game. Nonetheless, excited to see what this game will be like. I myself definitely need to research it more because I've yet to back it, and I originally didn't want to back it because I most recently backed the Apex Legends board game, which was another game that was originally a computer game, and that's also a tactical shooter game. So I'd have to be crazy to back another board game that's based on a first-person shooter video game.
I was just going to say, the one thing that's really surprising me here is that it looks like a two-player game, which, if I'm thinking Call of Duty, I'm thinking a team-based shooter, and it looks like you're going 1-to-1 with two different operators trying to take each other out. So that's both intriguing and somewhat, I guess, disappointing in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if there's I didn't read through it all to understand if there's expansions that maybe do, but
I can only imagine there has to be in the future.
I have watched some video content on the Call of Duty board game. You can buy multiple core sets if you want to do like 2v2 or more than two players. So you can buy more than one, but maybe that's what's hurting it a little bit, is that only with the core box you can only play 1v1. The thing that intrigues me with the Call of Duty game here is that it's all hidden movement. So each player has their own player screen. You're programming your movement ahead of time, and then you all reveal your movement all at the same time, and you're moving one of your program spots at a time. So essentially you're running to these different locations, and then mid movement you can then, depending on if you had turned your guy or not to the correct direction, or aiming the correct way, you can then take a fire or a pot shot at somebody or shoot at somebody, and then you can continue on your movement, and each player is doing one of their program movements at a time. And the orientation of your body actually matters in this game too. So I think they're trying to capture that FPS type feel, but 1v1, yeah, like you guys both said, I don't know. Having to buy multiple core sets to make it more than that is a little tough.
Yep. So we'll see how this game does. Obviously, nonetheless, it's cool to see that there's a Call of Duty board game, and hopefully it brings in new gamers and exposes them to the hobby. But with that said, we'll conclude then our BGG Top Hotness segment. And
wait, I want to add one more thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Cory. One more thing.
So the BGG Top Hotness here. So I just want to point out the games number 2 and 3 on the list. So Voidfall and Last Light. John did mention that there's a lot of like sci-fi games here. I wanted to mention that both of these games, so Last Light is made by Roy Kennedy of the Dice Tower, so that's kind of a cool thing. But they both are 4X games. And so Last Light is said to be a 4X traditional Ameritrash style, but plays in about 1 hour. So a 4X game in 1 hour. So that's very unique. Where it's simultaneous actions. Each player reveals what action they're doing all at the same time, and you carry them all out at the same time. So that's supposed to really speed up the game. But then it's kind of funny because the number 2 game, Voidfall, is another 4X game, but it's not trying to do it in the quickest amount of time, but it's taking a spin in the other direction, where it's a Euro 4X, where it's more about that resource management, resource building, very deterministic, combat and decisions you're making with the strategy. But interestingly enough, I'm excited to try both for those different reasons.
Yeah, agreed. I've yet to really look into either of those games, so I'm definitely excited to see what those games have to offer. So with that said, we'll move on now to our top 5 segment here, and this time we'll be talking about 5 of our favorite deck builders amongst us in Talking Cardboard. And to get things started, the first game, or we'll say franchise or series of games we'll talk about, is Clank. Now, I personally first played the original. I think I did play the original Clank, which was like the medieval castle themed one where you're fighting dragons or whatever, and I had a good experience with that and would almost want to try that one again. But Cory and John, I think you've probably played more of the other Clank games since that original one was released. So I'll give you guys, Cory, give your 2 cents on Clank, and then John.
Yeah, Clank's awesome. All the different versions of Clank are different enough to where you can own multiple different versions of it and get a different experience out of each one. They all provide different things. They all have their pros and cons, but yeah, John can speak to it too. I think we've played all the Clank versions of Clank. I think literally. So,
yeah, I myself own Clank in Space and Clank Catacombs, the newest edition, and then obviously we've played Clank and the legacy game Clank Acquisitions Incorporated, or I can't remember the exact title. All really fun. I guess the big thing to say with Clank is it's a deck builder paired with a dungeon delving experience, and it really holds true to this push your luck mechanic where the further you get into the dungeon, the better artifact you're going to get, which triggers end game points. But this game has a really high chance of the longer the dungeon, the more likely you are to get attacked by the dragon or the alien mastermind guy that's after you, and that's where the push your luck comes in, because you got to get out to actually score points at the end of the game. If you don't, you're just sitting with 0. So very, very fun deck builder. Lots of synergies, a lot of strategies. Great game.
Yep.
Well, almost all the way out. So I mean, if you make it to the top half of the board, or close to the beginning, you can still score your points. You just don't get those bonus points. But I think that's another cool thing too, because you really can push your luck and still essentially die. But if you die above ground, you get to keep your points, and you could still potentially win the game. So I don't know any other games that do that. It's push your luck, but not to the point where it's overly punishing, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So for the sake of time, we'll kind of gloss over the next 2 that are in our top 5 list, which are Dune Imperium and Undaunted. Dune Imperium we've already talked about a little earlier in this episode, since it appeared on the BGG Top Hotness list, as well as Undaunted, which was a game John was recently playing. I don't know if there's any additional comments you guys wanted to make about either of those 2 games.
Dune Imperium's awesome. Go get it if you've never played it. It's a good blend of deck building, area control, worker placement. It's got everything, and it does it so seamlessly and well. Just go buy it. And Undaunted, all I'll say is if you're a history fan, World War II theme, it's great.
I was going to say, I would take it even a step further. Like, I think Undaunted is a great introductory to war games in general, for people that are maybe a little scared off from the war game genre. So
agreed. 100% agree that Undaunted is definitely a great introductory war game, and in doing so, a great introductory to the deck building mechanism at the same time. So you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, per se, to introduce someone to a war game while also introducing them to the deck building mechanic, which is, of course, the point of this list. So with that said, we'll go on the next game that we kind of agreed on that is a solid deck builder was Star Realms. For me, I enjoy Star Realms. I just feel that it got a little blah real quickly, but then I see my wife obsessing over it, and it sounds like Cory's wife also is obsessing over it. And I think that really illustrates that this is a game that clearly is a solid deck builder. So yeah, Cory, go ahead with what you want to say about it.
It is like the only game that I can get my wife to play that is confrontational or like combat heavy. She completely cannot stand games where you're attacking one another and trying to hurt each other's life points. But for whatever reason, this game just transcends that. It's another game that's just so simple to teach, simple to play, simple to learn, simple to do well in, and it's just so combo heavy too that every card you're adding to your deck really plays into your overall strategy. If you play down like two red cards, all of a sudden now you're feeling extra powerful, and then like a third red card, and everything just feels like it just combos so nicely and is so satisfying. I don't understand why it transcends my wife's disdain for that style of game, but it does.
Yep. You have any comments on Star Realms, John?
Nope.
In that case, we'll move on to then the last of our 5 games we really enjoy as deck builders, and that's Moonrakers. And this is definitely a game that's newer in general. I think definitely the newest game of these 5, and one that we recently talked about, I think either in the second or first podcast episode, thanks to Cory's brother Blake bringing over to my house for us to play. Yeah, Cory, I'll default to you on kind of giving your high-level thoughts of Moonrakers.
Wow, I mean, yeah, this game really hit a home run for me. I mean, when we first got it down to the table, I think it was at Nick's house, and my brother had set it up and splayed out all the cards and started describing the game, and immediately I was thinking, I'm just gonna go take a nap because this is not gonna be fun. I just looked too simple. It reminded me up front a lot of Munchkin, where you're trying to negotiate over points and negotiate over rewards off of cards and trying to kind of semi-cooperatively work toward a common goal, yet try to get the most points to win. But man, I mean, when we started playing it and we started negotiating over these missions and like, hey, I'll go on that mission with you and I'll help you take it down. No way in heck am I taking Cory on this mission. I'm taking Nick. Or kind of picking on the leader, and just the table talk that it generated. It's got the deck building in it and the missions and the victory points and all those common tropes, but the spin that it takes with the whole negotiation and taking people on missions to help overcome these missions that are too difficult to do on your own, that was the curveball in the design that this game needed to make it an all-star for me. Just a ton of fun.
Any other additional comments, John?
John, do you
I agree with what Cory said. I like the uniqueness of how you're sending or going out on missions. Yeah, doing kind of that banter back and forth of negotiating who's going to come with you. Is it going to be one person, everyone? I mean, it's just you can do anything, or you can just go back and be like, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to try to do this on my own, and see after seeing what's out there. So great game.
Yeah, or hey, I can for sure help you beat this mission, and then sure, I'll take you along and heart of the cards, and you're just trying to top deck that card that you need to overcome it, and 90% of the time you don't, and you both fail, and then everybody gets mad. So
you wasted your turn,
wasted everything.
So thanks, guys, for the comments about our top deck builders. With that, for sake of time, we'll skip our question of the week segment this episode, which will hopefully then encourage you to tune into our next podcast episode, where we will definitely make sure we include our question of the week, because we're going to talk about game stores that are requiring players to pay to play a game inside their store. I think this is something that might be starting to become a trend. But we'll talk about that in detail again in our next podcast episode for our question of the week segment for episode number 4. We'll move on then to Talking Cardboard news. First thing I wanted to mention is we probably already alluded to the fact we're going to be present at a Settlers of Catan tournament here in the Minnesota Twin Cities area, and that did occur a couple weeks ago. It was a great experience to be present at a massive Settlers of Catan, an official Settlers of Catan tournament. So that was really cool. Later this month, John and I are looking at going down to this first Minnesota board game group muster, which is a board game group that's focused on heavy strategy war games, and they always do a full weekend at a hotel down in southern Minnesota where they just play games constantly for the full weekend. Also, something that I hope to make a lot of content about is this Rome Total War game that I actually got from the publisher, which I'm really stoked about because it's a legitimate prototype copy. As you can see, there's no artwork on the back yet because it's still a prototype, so that's really cool. Rome Total War, one of my favorite PC games as a child, so now to have the prototype of the board game is a really cool experience for me. Then John was working on our all-day board game marathon to support the Extra Life Foundation, right, John?
Yes, and we're shooting to do that sometime in mid to late October. So definitely tune in on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, wherever. Get some views on that, and support the kids. All donations are definitely appreciated and goes to a good cause. Great,
thanks, John. And finally, end of this month here in August, 27th through the 29th is the 2D Con convention in Minneapolis, which is both a board game and video game convention where we will be present at, and we're looking forward to that convention. It'll be the first time that we've been to that and experienced it. So one additional thing that I almost forgot to mention is there is CMON Con occurring here in Minnesota, specifically at the Games Center store in Roseville, Minnesota. That's a convention that apparently is normally in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm hoping Talking Cardboard can actually have a presence at that convention as well. So if someone from CMON or the Game Center is listening to this podcast, please reach out and let us crash the party, so to speak, because we definitely would love to be there to help promote CMON games, because I have a lot of CMON games in my collection. A lot of Zombicide probably first and foremost comes to mind for CMON games that I enjoy. So with that said, thanks for everyone listening to this podcast, or for those watching the podcast video on our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your support and attention. Please like and subscribe to our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel if you're watching via YouTube, or of course follow our podcast. And we also do TikToks and Twitter and other content, and of course conventions. So we hope to see you in person someday if you're listening. And with that said, I'm Nick from Talking Cardboard, and we look forward to seeing you guys again in the future. Thanks, guys.